Now we're going to use Excel to play around with some of the data for this story. It was a story about Pfizer's payments to doctors who are basically paid to lead educational forums in which other doctors were lectured on the use of Pfizer's drugs. So the first thing we're going to do here is import our data. The data is in a text file, just a flat file with text. And data is often obtained either in these files or in what are called comma-separated values, or CSV files, which are basically just a text file where the values are separated by commas. It's a good idea to download or ask for data in these formats. Just about any software that handles data can export as a text file, and they're very easy to import into Excel or other programs. Now, CSV files just open in Excel. Text files we have to import, but it's very easy, and I'll show you how. To do that, we go to the Data menu. Not surprisingly, we go to Get External Data from Text, and you'll see there is a file in that folder called Pfizer Payments, which is a text document. So I'm going to open that by double-clicking on it, and I see this dialog box. Now, this file, text files come in a couple of formats: delimited or fixed width. This is a delimited file, and I think the individual entries are separated here by tabs. So we're going to select a delimited text file, click on Next, and indeed Excel has recognized that the entries are separated by a tab, and that is good. So we can move on. If it was another delimiter, we could select it there. We move on, and then we get the options to format our data. So basically we can go through these columns. What is this? Well, this is actually text entries, this column, as is the second one. The third one is also text. That's names of cities. That's text as well, as are the abbreviations for the state, the categories of the payments, and then we have two columns where basically it's currency. We can leave those as general. They're numbers, they're not text or date. Actually, we have three columns, I believe, with those numbers in. So they can be left as general, and then we can click Finish. We want to put it into the top left-hand cell, and OK. So, having imported the data, I'm going to do a couple of things. Basically, save it twice. First, just as Pfizer Payments, as a spreadsheet, an Excel workbook this time, not a text file. And secondly, following my good practice, the one I'm going to work in, I'm going to give a different name, Pfizer Payments Edit. Okay, that's done. So let's take a look at the data. I'm just going to narrow this column down a bit to make it easier to look at. Similarly with this one. So this is a rather bigger data set. If we scroll down to the end, we'll see there are more than 10,000 payments made to individual doctors, and these were payments made in the second half of 2009. Okay, just going to tidy this up a little bit, make it easier to work with. Bolding the top row will help. And then I'm going to do one more thing with this top row. I'm going to go to the View menu and Freeze Panes and select Freeze Top Row. Now what that means now, as I scroll through the spreadsheet, the column headings remain there so I know what I'm looking at. And lastly, before we start actually manipulating the data, just a little bit of formatting on these currency columns at the end as before. Format cells, currency, don't need any decimal places, dollar is good, and there we go. And nicer, tidied up data set. Okay, Now I want to show you how to filter data in Excel, one of our key operations when manipulating data. Not surprisingly, we do it in the data menu, and when we get there we'll see there is this filter option, so I'm going to click on that. Now see what's happened. Each of the columns now has a little square with a downwards pointing triangle in it, and it's these buttons that we will use to filter the data. So let's say I want to see just the doctors in California who were paid to lecture other doctors about Pfizer's drugs and who were paid greater or equal to $10,000 or more. That's very easy to do. Now I've set up these filters. So we just go across, state is the first one, click on that, and I want to deselect all just by clicking in that box and select just the state I want to look at, click OK, and now our view of the data just has the doctors in California. Now the other data is still in the spreadsheet, it's just being hidden from us for the time being by the filter. Next thing, we want to look at category. The payments to lecture on drugs are called expert-led forums. We don't want anything else like business-related travel or meals. So basically do the same thing here. Deselect, select all, select expert-led forums, OK, and now our view of the data only has that. Final thing we want to do is the greater or equal to 10,000 on the payments. And we do that in total. We don't need to worry that payments can be monetary or non-monetary. It turns out that all the ones for expert-led forums are monetary, so we can just do it on the total. So check the button as before. However, we don't want to do the same operation. It will be very laborious to go through and click the value of every payment above $10,000. There is a much better way to do it, and it's under number filters. And remember, we want greater than or equal to. We get this dialog box. We could also add a second qualifier to the filter, but we're just going to go with is greater than or equal to 10,000. We don't need the comma in there or the currency sign, just give the basic number. Click OK, and now we should have a list of 31 doctors who are in California and were paid more than 10,000 to lecture on Pfizer's drugs in the second half of 2009. I think it makes more sense to actually sort this list of doctors, so I'm going to do that. Select all the data I want to sort, sort by total, values, pick the largest to smallest, makes the most sense, and click OK. And now we can see very clearly that Gerald Michael Sachs of Santa Monica was by far the best paid of these doctors, earning nearly $150,000 in the second half of 2009 for lecturing on Pfizer's drugs. Okay. By the way, if you want to save a filtered view for later use, you can copy it, Control-C, go into a new worksheet and paste it into there. And now we just have the data for those 31 doctors. And I can save that as under a new name, go down to sheet 2, rename, and I'll just call it CA 10,000 plus. Okay, let's go back to the original spreadsheet. We can remove the filters very easily just by clicking on the button, and we have all of the data back as before. Next thing I want to show you is doing basically subtotaling data. That's a common operation that you might want to do. And I'm going to basically look at the total payments in all categories by state, subtotal it by state. So to do that, first I'm going to select all the data by just clicking at the top left. I'm going to sort it by state first, by state on values A to Z, that's fine. Now we have all the payments listed by state, starting off with 1 in Alaska, Alabama, and so on. And now I can do the subtotal. Again, this is under the data menu. It's here over to the right, subtotal. And we do want, at each change by state, we do want to use the function sum. We could count, that would just be the number of payments per state. We could get the average payment per state, the maximum payment, and so on. But no, we want sum, we want to add them up, and we want that added to the total. Obviously you can customize this how you want. Click OK. It may first look as if not much has happened, but you do see that now we have these totals after the lists of all the payments. That isn't particularly easy to read, but this is just one now of 3 views of the data we had. We're in view 3. If I click on the little 2 over here, you will see that the totals are now listed. So if we look at California, say, we have 4.7 or so $million, and the similar totals for each state. View 1 gives the grand total. Here we can't actually see the whole number. If I make the column a little wider, you see that the total payments are more than $35 million. So that's how we do subtotals. They're easily removed, just like filters. Go back to subtotal and go remove all. And we're back to the full data set as before. Now the final thing I want to show you in Excel is called a pivot table, and it basically allows you to do 2 subtotal operations at the same time. So what I'm going to do, as well as splitting and adding up the payments by state, I'm going to simultaneously split them and add them up by category to create a new table, which is called a pivot table. Okay, let's do that. We find pivot table in the Insert menu. So I'm going to go to Insert, Pivot Table. It has selected the entire range of the data. That is good. That is what we want. And do make sure that it's going to put this pivot table into a new worksheet. Don't want it put into your existing worksheet. Okay, now we can just click OK, and we get this view. And basically we need to select the things we want. We want the state, we want the category, and we want the totals. Now we've got to get them in the right place. I'm going to put the states in the columns. Leave the rows in the categories, and it says sum of total here. Again, we could select different totals if we wanted to, different things to do with the total. By selecting value field settings, we could do a count, an average, a maximum, and so on. Similarly with the subtotal. But anyway, sum is actually what we want. We can now close that down, and we'll see we have by state the payments broken up by category. I'm just going to do some formatting, format the cells to currency so it's a little easier to look at, and I'm going to do a format auto fit column width so I can actually see all the numbers, and there we go. So with California, which we looked at before, that 4.7 or so million is broken up in this way, and 1.46 million of it is the expert-led forums that we're interested in. Goes through all of the states, and you have the totals at the edge of the pivot table.